Welcome to the Feng Shui Mastery Show with your host, me, Kathy Hargren. Now, I have a fantastic guest today, and she's come along to share some of her experiences of something that I get more and more feedback from with a lot of my students or people who are interested in this subject, and that is the preamble to implementing any feng shui is really letting go of what you've already acquired. So, for example, people are very interested in, oh, where do they put this, where do they put that in the approach to feng shui. However, they don't realise that what they've got around them already is almost like an internal prison, which is why I've got this slide in front of us. We often feel imprisoned, and we've got a special guest here today, and she's going to tell us all about her experience in this particular process. Hi there, Una.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much. Thanks for coming along today, because it's one thing for me to teach this kind of material, but
Mm.
I have so many so much feedback from a variety of people right across the world who tell me about their experiences, and I just thought, well, it'd be nice to take that through just with yourself
Yeah.
and discover what that process means to people on all different levels, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, physically. It just hits people at so many different levels. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, certainly. When you have a house full of clutter like I did, I my decluttering was actually not my own clutter, but belonged to a relative of mine who, for over 60 years of living at the same property, had accumulated not only icons of Irish history, but everything else as well. So certainly I did feel imprisoned in that house because it was just all coming in on top of me. And I actually felt more at ease when I was out of the house rather than in the house. So clearly I needed to do something pretty
Yeah,
drastic.
yeah, that,
Yeah.
that's right. Because a lot of people that I've been on visits, one particular older couple in southern England,
Yeah.
I found them in deck chairs one day when I went to see them, and I asked them, "Why are you sitting out here in deck chairs?" I mean, it was a sunny day, but they actually said, "There's nowhere for us to sit down inside. We've accumulated 60, 70 years worth of stuff in the house."
Yes.
And they were saying, "Oh, one day we're going to get round to it," but you knew that one day was never going to happen.
Yeah.
But people have almost bordering on psychological problems with, and it doesn't have to be hoarding necessarily. It can just be how clutter impedes people's flow, whether it's thinking, whether it's moving. And how has that been showing up in your life, for example?
Certainly, I can understand the relationship between the clutter in my environment and the clutter in my head, particularly. Certainly when I went through the decluttering process, you feel like there's this big weight lifted off your mind, and you can think more clearly. You really feel lighter in yourself. So it certainly did translate for me, at least, that once I had decluttered in the surroundings around me, the decluttering also happened in my head, and now I feel so much better, and I'm much more motivated now and driven to do things.
Yeah. Let's just go on to one of these pictures here where, just surrounded by like lots of archaic items that don't really synchronize at all with each other. Like there's some paint next to a TV, and
Yeah.
and what does that kind of show up for you in terms of a mindset?
Yeah, similar, I suppose, disorganization, and just the same as your slide shows that, or the picture that, there's a disconnect with the things in the house. There's also a disconnect with what's going on in your brain, and you're thinking about 101 different things, and so it's much harder to focus on one thing and get to achieve something on that one thing. Instead, you feel your mind has been pulled from one to another to another.
Yeah.
So certainly there's a lot of disarray there as well.
Yeah. I mean, here's some boxes that, just to demonstrate, this was another client, and you won't believe it, but these boxes, they started off in Manchester, and 8 years later, the stuff is still in the same boxes, but now they're in the south of England. So basically, can you see how people transport their life around, literally in boxes?
Definitely, yeah. And for me, because the clutter that I was dealing with wasn't my own clutter, it's sometimes even worse because you don't know what's valuable, what should be thrown out. But in this case, everything had to go for me. So most of what was there had no meaning to anybody else's life, so I could get rid of it.
Yeah.
However, if it's your own clutter, you do have a tendency to hold on to it because you think, oh yeah, I might use that someday, or oh, I spent a lot on that, so therefore it must be valuable, so therefore I'm going to keep it. So it does, yeah, I can see how people
Yeah.
accumulate easily.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction you've made there because um, I know that I've been in many, many houses and where people have passed on, when the people come next and they see all this clutter,
Mhm.
they just put it in a dump. So it really does beg the question about that whole thing of keep your own house in order. I mean, it brings a different meaning to it in terms of, make sure that, you have your own house in order because when someone else, a stranger, comes along, they
Mhm.
don't have the same kind of emotional connection and therefore they don't, even if you do have items that are emotionally connected to you, you have a choice as to where they go. So, for my own example, is my mum was a very creative lady, and we used to design leather work and make leather belts and slides. Now, when she passed on, I had the ability to say, well, I want these creative tools to go to a creative environment like a children's play centre or something like that. So I
Mhm.
was taking proaction by using what could easily have meant nothing to a stranger, just thrown away in a bin, and I
Yeah.
was actually taking them and getting them to be used somewhere else. And so it is does come back down to personal responsibility as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, because I would have done something similar like that. My aunt's valuables, or for want of a better word, or possessions, like that, they might mean something to somebody of like-mindedness. So because of her age, I brought it to the local charity shop as well. And I'm sure it did give, joy or, some satisfaction to other people who were buying the stuff rather than, as you said, throwing it into the dump.
Yeah, and just realigning this conversation that it's not just about elderly people though, because a lot of people, especially the younger generations, are exposed to massive consumerism,
True.
um, and so basically they also we've all been caught up in this acquisition culture. I know myself have been to many different cultures around the world, and for example, the Maoris or the Aborigines or the First Nations in Canada, and you look. The Western mind is trained to look for things, either things to buy or things to look at. And when you turn up in these environments and there's nothing to focus the mind on because there's nothing there. You
Yeah.
think, oh yeah, is that sad, isn't it? They haven't got anything, but actually, a lot of those cultures have chosen not to acquire anything because they don't want anything, you know.
Yes.
And yet, I wonder if this is a statement about the more materialistic Western style of living that to have things is more of a status symbol. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and certainly the younger generation are much more consumer conscious, I suppose, than we are, and I think as well, a lot of the thing is the cost of things have gone down, and so they purchase a lot more. They have a lot more purchasing power, at least. So certainly their ability to clutter and to accumulate is much greater than our generation, I would think.
But having said that, I've found with the older generation, because they've come through wars,
Hmm.
that, they did hold on to things because they knew what it was like not to have anything. So it seems like your aunt here has, saved an awful lot of items. And you see that in like people of 70 upwards, really. I mean, I go into households of 90-year-old ladies and men that they've had a culture of wanting to hang on to things only because they knew what it was like not to have anything.
Yeah, yeah,
So they are the opposite polarization of the consumer world, where easy to attain but
yeah,
difficult to get rid of.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, So here we have more boxes here. As I said, these boxes originated in Manchester, and now the same boxes are in the south of England, and they've travelled all that way. And you know, the person who owned these particular boxes, he didn't mind me taking the photographs, but he wasn't really aware that he was carrying his life around in a box,
Mm.
and his family's life around in a box. And we've heard that song, haven't we? Living life in a cardboard box. I wonder if we all live our lives in boxes where our lives are being directed by the very things that are in and around us immediately. So basically, what I wanted to ask yourself was, as you started to clear away the clutter, how did that start to affect your mind?
Yeah, well, it does affect you mentally, physically, and emotionally. And initially, I just didn't know where to get started. But thanks to you, Kathy, I liked the graded way that you suggested, starting with the easiest room to tackle and taking things up to the front door so that each time you were leaving, there is always something to take out with you. And then as the stuff started to leave the premises, I realised how lighter I became and I began to feel, and certainly mentally, I felt there was a lot of clearance in my head as well because you're not distracted by all of this clutter around you any longer. So it was fantastic for me. I really benefited from it.
Yeah. And can you just say something about, I know you're starting your own business,
Hmm.
um, and how that business was maybe stuttering a little bit pre clearing the clutter. I know it wasn't your house, but you were having to deal with all that.
Yes,
And then afterwards, how the flow of ideas and the clarity. You mentioned something like that before.
that's true. Actually, I am starting my own business, and initially, I don't know, does it affect everybody? But initially, I was thinking, oh God, I had so much to do, and so there's so much going on. I was very I didn't know where to go next, or what to do next, or what to be done ahead of this or that. But when I went through the decluttering process that you had taught me, and I cleared out all my surroundings, it was amazing because I got great clarity of mind, and now I'm much more motivated, and I have my list, and I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm a lot more driven now as a result of that. So it's fantastic. My business has taken off now, and I've a lot more clarity of mind to be able to deal with it now. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I mean, we're just looking at this other slide where there's just loads and loads of items just thrown onto a bed. And I'm not saying everybody lives in this particular degree of chaos, but we've got this great big square box in the centre here of this slide, and it is the TV, and you can tell how so many people's lives are rotating around this square box,
Yes.
and you know, I know lots of people increasingly don't have a TV anymore. They've let go of it. I mean, the computer has replaced it to some extent, but what I want to get across also with the clutter clearing is, what do we have on our walls that are actually, subliminally affecting us? And people have pictures up there for years and years, and then they wonder why they feel a certain way.
Mhm.
Um, we've got just another picture here, a slide, the same items, but you know, when you've got mirrors duplicating that chaos, then
Mhm.
you can imagine that the magnification of that chaos becomes even greater. Did you want to say a little bit about, some of the pictures that maybe you found on the walls?
Yeah, as I said, initially they were difficult to get rid of per se, and even to say that is hard because you do know they're of sentimental value to the previous person, and
Yeah,
being a relative, you do have a certain attachment to her. So I did feel a bit bad initially taking the stuff down, but having said that, now that I've replaced it with much brighter and lighter pictures, and they're not just of say people, but they're scenes, and they're um, pleasant scenes and country scenes and things that bring a lot more
nature.
calm,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot more calm into my life. That I can see how, certainly on an emotional level, I feel a lot more balanced and calm and not distracted near
Yeah.
as much as I had been.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good to hear. Now we can see now these slides where the front entrance, which is so important when it's almost like when you're going into anywhere. The front entrance is very, very important, and I know that this picture, when I saw this entrance, there were so many magazines, Women's Weekly and other very old magazines that your auntie had. They
Yes,
were all clogging up this seat out in the area. There was loads of tins from the old Jacobs years,
that's
and
right.
look at it now. It looks just so much more. You can breathe. It feels like you can breathe.
Yes, absolutely. Because, initially, um, you wonder will you ever get to clear the place and what, and it seems very overpowering. But once you get into a system like you taught me, you actually can create a rhythm whereby it's easier to let go of things then. But I do realise that you can get attached to things emotionally if there are, your own personal items. But in this case, for me, because they weren't my own, it was a little
Okay.
bit easier.
Yeah.
However, it was just the volume and the amount of it, especially because it was a full house I was clearing, not just one room. It was overpowering initially, but as I said, once I got into that system that you gave me, it was great to get into the rhythm, and I actually really enjoyed then the clearing, and you get great satisfaction when you've got one room cleared, and then you move on to the next one, and you can see the progress being made.
Yeah. And also, when you were doing that, the process of it, what kind of energy did you kind of pick up? I mean, was it slow or spiraling down, or was it, what kind of energy
Yes.
did you feel?
Initially, yes, it was. I suppose a dark type of energy because my aunt has passed away, so it had a lot of emotional attachment from that perspective.
Sure.
However, when you clear the room or a particular room before you move on to the next one, and you see, all the positives then in the room because it's much lighter and brighter, it does lift the mood in you,
Yeah.
and you do feel, well, even if your aunt was still there, she'd be delighted because there were things that she'd wanted to clear forever, and she just never got around to it. So she would have been equally happy to see the clearance as I was.
That's interesting you say that. What do you think stops people? Why do people become imprisoned with what's around them, do you think?
It's difficult to say. I suppose we prioritize differently, and a lot of the time we can put things on the long finger or procrastinate, said, oh yeah, I must get around to doing that or clearing that or getting rid of that. But for whatever reason, I'm not sure,
Mm,
we don't actually do it.
mm,
As I said, we prioritize and we decide, oh no, we need to do this instead of that, and I'll do
yeah.
that tomorrow and I'll do that tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes.
That's right, yeah. Tomorrow is now, isn't it? And the thing is that I know a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and business people, and they really struggle with going forward, or the blockages that they find they that they think are outside of them. Because the other aspect of all this clutter is that it's not exact. It's yes, we can physically, visibly see
Hmm.
the blockages, but it's only a demonstration or a reflection of the blockages within the person, would you say?
Yes. Yeah. And I like now I feel like there's space to breathe and to live. I have much more of an horizon in which I can see the future, and all around me just I feel elevated and spacious. And now I feel like I have a blank canvas in which I can make a different statement. So it's kind of like a new beginning for me.
Yep. And just looking at this space here, I mean, when I first saw it, you couldn't see outside, the windows. You couldn't, it was a very dark. And this is the other thing is that people forget to let the light in, the natural light into their homes, and then
Yes.
they don't have a relationship with nature. Most people, I mean, in this case, this was out in the countryside, but a lot of people don't have nature around them because they live in inner cities. So they're cut off from the one thing that actually can be inspiring and life giving. And the other here, we see this big mirror on this dressing table. I mean, it's kind of an old fashioned item of furniture, but wherever you see mirrors, the mirrors are duplicating what they're reflecting. So in this case, this mirror was duplicating all the chaos and the confusion and clutter that was around it. And now it's more free and uplifting. And um, it just creates space. It's like that old saying, isn't it? I don't know if you've heard the story from Zen, Zen Buddhism, where the student says to the Zen master, "Oh, can you teach me things?" And the Zen master says, "Well," he says, "your cup is overflowing. How can you learn anything new? Because there's no space within you. So that's why I always refer to this whole process as also quite spiritual, because, people want new things to come into their life. But how can those new things, whether it's money or relationships, how can those new things come into their life if they've got no space within their own homes or within their own internal self? There's no space to
Yes.
actually. Does that make sense to yourself?
It definitely does, yes. And even in terms of my business, there wasn't any space to move and to progress. Whereas now that I've decluttered both my house and my brain as a result, a lot more things are happening now, and opportunities came in that never presented themselves before. So it's certainly, even on as well as an emotional level, feeling like you have a lot more space in your head and you're easier to breathe, business wise, is similar.
Do you think, though, that, it wasn't that the opportunities weren't there, but they were hidden by all the clutter?
Definitely,
Maybe
yeah.
the opportunities were always there, but now
'Cause
you're looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, because I asked that myself the same question. How is it that that didn't happen before? Opportunities that could have happened. It's just the timing, for some reason, it didn't. And I was thinking to myself afterwards, it's probably because I wasn't ready for it, because there was so much clutter going on in my head
Yeah.
that maybe had it come at an earlier stage, I wouldn't have recognised it.
Yeah, true. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, here's some of all the kind of different things that are going on in people's minds. Often people say, "Oh, I must go to the auction and sell all that stuff in the garage or do a swap," and because these are all delay tactics. Because that, as you said, that one day never happens.
Yes.
Um, if they haven't used it, the question you have to ask is, do you really need it? And there's always that one day I will need it, but by then a lot of things are changing fast in terms of, you don't need those things anymore. People clutter their homes in the drawers and sheds. The more spaces they have to hide things, the more they will actually fill them. And
Yes.
without actually consciously referring to those places that are cluttered, I think subconsciously and subliminally, people know that all that stuff, just stuff, is there, and they don't actually want to look at it. I myself cleared a house where my own family grew up, 44 years, and it was one of the hardest jobs I've ever done, is letting go of all the memories associated with even with furniture. When the man was coming to take the furniture and I was getting rid of it, I started crying, and it was because of what it represented.
Yes. Yeah. And we do have an emotional attachment to some
Yeah,
things, especially I found that with my aunt's house, because obviously she was dear to me, and we had a lot of memories together, and and it's difficult to do it on behalf of somebody else. But as I said earlier, I do feel that she herself would have been delighted, because she had planned on doing it for so long and never actually got around to it, that
yeah,
me doing it was almost doing it for her
yeah.
as much as was doing it to her house.
That's right. The thing is that I think people do need assistance at times, but I still are of the thinking that people have to do it, let go of the stuff, because if they don't let go of the stuff themselves, then then they don't go through that process of what it's like to let go and create the space inside for new things to come in. So people sometimes, like, they want me to do the feng shui for them. I can do consultation, but I can't actually physically change it for them, because in the act of changing those things, the energy is changing within themselves.
That's true. Yes, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Also, you do have a great feeling of satisfaction when you've made the changes as well, because it's you that's made them, and so it's personal to you, and that's why I think it has so much of an effect on your, um, on you emotionally and on a spiritual level even.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And this is ultimately the kind of feeling people want to actually um, be around, and that is a harmonious space, a place of tranquility. You said before that sometimes you didn't want to return to the property because it was so cluttered, and
Yeah,
that you prefer to be outside.
I used to even go for a coffee to a local cafe, just because I just couldn't face going back to the house. But now it's quite the opposite. Now I invite people in for a coffee rather than going out.
That's
So
right.
It's
Yeah.
much more livable and much more pleasant, and it's a great place to bring people now.
Yeah, and the thing is that the importance of feeling like this, harmonious and tranquil, is that when you have that in your surroundings, then it allows people to feel that inside because ultimately this is all about internal feng shui. This is all about, how people want to feel about themselves and about others and their life internally. So the reason why I talk about feng shui on the outside is because it's easier to actually point the finger on things on the outside, but ultimately, all roads lead back to the internal architecture, the many rooms and hidden attics and lofts within all of us that some of us don't ever open those doors ever in a whole lifetime. And that's where repression obviously comes in, really. But ultimately, people are looking for peace of mind and tranquility. And when they let go of all of the stuff, the sheer stuff that they have within their own external environment, then they're able to get a little bit of nirvana, shall we say, internally. Is that what you discovered for yourself?
Yeah, certainly I can relate to that, Kathy. That's for sure.
So, is there anything that you would impart to the listeners about your own process and what you feel is very important on this journey of letting go?
Well, I would think probably start small first of all, because at least when you do that, it's achievable. Decide on one area at a time, and like you had taught me, Kathy, essentially to start small, pick a small area, work on that, and achieve what you want to in that area, and then move on to the bigger stuff. And slowly but surely, as you see the clearing happening, you really feel lighter and you can think more clearly, and it gets a complete weight off your mind.
Yeah, yeah. I think when you break it down into small little chunks, it's more achievable, as you say, as opposed to just going in and being totally, overwhelmed by the enormity of what appears to be an impossible job.
Yes, definitely. Because initially, when you start the job, you kind of feel a bit overwhelmed, but when you start to see a little bit of progress around you, certainly it kind of gives you the drive then to continue.
Well, I'd just like to thank you, Una, for sharing all your insights and your optimism and fantastic results that you've got yourself, because I know that your business is now going from strength to strength, and I'm sure that the clearance of the acquisition of your auntie's goods, and now you're living in that space yourself. I think that that certainly had a contribution to make to now having a more clearer focus on where you're going in your own business.
Well, thanks to you, Kathy, because without your assistance and giving me the system to uh, do that decluttering, I don't know whether I'd actually ever have got around to it. So thank you for giving me the drive to get there, and also the impact it has had on my business too.
Yeah, brilliant. I like to hear all these success stories. And for those people listening, if they want to discover a little bit more about how to do this for themselves and get some more success in their business and or other aspects of their life, you can just sign up for the free webinar where I actually talk about the 5 steps to creating wealth. And I'm not just talking about wealth in terms of money, but wealth in terms of a better quality of life. So thank you for listening, folks, and see you on the next channel.